What have you thought on the basketball side with the players announcing that they are heading out? The most notable, I'd say, the last two. Tobe Awaka announcing he's entering the transfer portal with still some hope there that maybe that could change and he could come back. And then Jonas Aidoo yesterday with the announcement that he'll put his name in the draft, go through that process as well as the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's been quite the week, and 2 official visitors coming in this weekend and other names on the board. It's one thing after the next, but such is the case in world of college athletics that we live in nowadays. With Tobe Awaka, I mean, to be honest with you, neither of the two were all that surprising, just because they have had people pulling at them through third parties for quite some time now. And Tobe Awaka ultimately decides to hop in the portal. I don't think it was strictly NIL related. I'm sure that was a part of it, but I also think that in today's game where a lot of teams are running more small ball lineups or running with more one post player and putting an emphasis on shooting the basketball and spreading the floor, maybe looked at the minutes that could be allocated next season, and you see Jonas in front of you, and maybe you want to look elsewhere and go and try and find more playing time. But as you mentioned, I do think there's some hope that he could potentially remove his name from the portal and return, because he made that decision prior to Jonas making his decision. And I do know that Tennessee is meeting with Tobe Awaka today and having conversations with him possibly as we speak. So that is something to certainly keep an eye on, a possible return for Tobe Awaka. And then with Jonas, a little bit of what I said with Tobe applies to Jonas with the whole NIL thing and people pulling at him in different ways. Tennessee had to fight to keep Jonas last offseason, quite frankly, and I think those same conversations popped back up. And I also think that Jonas, speaking of shooting, I think he would like to be in an offense that shoots more or allows the post player to shoot more. And, whether that's a Rick Barnes fault or not, I don't really know, because I'm not going to fault Rick Barnes for trying to get a post player a bunch of shots when you have Dalton Connect and the SEC Player of the Year on your team and on your roster. But I do think that in terms of the basketball side of things, I think Jonas is looking for a more shooter-friendly offense for him as he tries to prove himself for the next step in professional basketball.
Help me understand something here, Ben. You mentioned the possibility of Tobe Awaka coming back because now Jonas is in the portal. But that would make total sense if Tennessee were not going to go out and try to bring in another center. If
Correct.
Tobe is going to be the post player along with Phillips and along with Estrella, okay, that makes sense for him to come back. But if Tennessee's going to go out and try to replace Aidoo's spot, then why would Tobe come back?
That is a great question, and that is an angle that I did not touch on, obviously, but one that I've been thinking to myself. And one, I guess I'm sure fans perk up when they hear, oh, Tennessee's meeting with Tobe. They're still talking. The door's still open. I'm sure fans perk up because Tobe is a fan favorite for how hard he plays. And Tennessee fans were not very happy. My mom called me right away when she found out and was very confused and frustrated when she heard that Tobe was leaving, because she loves watching Tobe play basketball and how hard he plays. So I'm sure fans perk up when they hear that the door is open for him to return. But because of what you were bringing up, it's something that I've been thinking about as well, Swain. I don't know that it's a guarantee that he does come back, because if he was wanting to leave so he can find a situation for him that will provide him more minutes, well, Tennessee's going to look to add somebody, and Tennessee has to look to add to their post play, because you're just going to have Cade Phillips and JP Estrella. I think JP Estrella is going to take a big step forward, but he's going to be an inexperienced sophomore next season. And if you're Tennessee, I don't think you can just solely rely on that going into next season. So I think that Tennessee is going to look to add somebody, and I think that they need to. So if you're Tobe, I'm not sure how that changes things for him, because I agree with you. I don't even really know what the answer is, because maybe Tennessee comes to a decision to where they just roll with Tobe, JP Estrella, and Cade Phillips. Maybe that's the solution if Tennessee can't add out of the portal. But I think with losing Jonas, I really like Tobey, but Tobey can't stay out of foul trouble, and I do think he gives up some size. So I also think it would be a risk to go in the next season with just Tobey and JP. So maybe Tennessee needs to cover its bases and make sure that it adds a forward in that regard. But then it goes back to square one of what you bring up, and Tobey once again having to battle for minutes.
Well, who are some of the options to replace Jonas Aidoo, a true center?
Yeah, well, Tennessee is kind of behind the eight ball in that regard. Not drastically, or they're not in the danger zone of missing out on a ton of guys. But I think they were surprised that both Tobey and Jonas decided to enter the portal, even if they were aware that other people were pulling at them. And Jonas doing so a couple of days after Tobey. I've lost all concept of time, but I believe Jonas was a couple of days after Tobey. I think that one caught them more off guard. And if you would have told them a couple of weeks ago, they weren't expecting to lose both of those guys or lose two post players in general. So they had to tell some guys like, hey, we've got three post players coming back. Like we're good in the post. But now things have changed, obviously, and they are circling the wagons in a sense. There's a big man from Rutgers who's in the portal, Clifford, and I'm going to butcher his name, so I apologize, Clifford, but Omer Yuri, I believe that's how you pronounce it, but he's a big man in the portal. He is sought after by many. I had a very productive season this past year. I think he's one that Tennessee's talking to, and then Christian Reeves at Duke, another name that they're having conversations with as well. So they're trying to play a little catch up because they were somewhat caught off guard by two bigs entering the portal, and they're having conversations, and we'll see where it leads to. Nothing definitive, like there appears to be some definitive answers coming up here on the perimeter with some guards.
Yeah, our conversation right now with Ben McKee of GoVols247.com is Josh and Swain today is set up on Kingston Pike at Harper Volkswagen. So is it fair to say Tennessee is further ahead in its search for guard help, guys on the wing with visitors that are scheduled to come in this weekend?
Absolutely. Tennessee's hosting two guard transfers this weekend, wing help, however you want to label it. I look at them as two shooters, although one is a 6'8" shooter that can play the 3 or the 4 in Darlin Stone Dubar, which is one heck of a name. The Hofstra transfer, he's 6'8", again, can play the 3 and the 4. I do think that Tennessee wants to find somebody that can play that Josiah Jordan James role of sorts, that can play the 3 or the 4 defensively. And Dubar is a heck of a shooter, shot 38% this past season at Hofstra, was also on the all-conference defensive team in his league. He will be here for an official visit, and I think Tennessee's in a really, really good situation, really good position for him. He'll be flying in from Charlotte later today. And then also making his way over from North Carolina is Cade Tyson, who is a guard, forward, however you want to look at it, a 3 or a 4, or I should say a 2 or a 3, from Belmont, who you want to talk about shooting the basketball. He is a sniper, has shot over 40% from 3 the last 2 seasons. I believe he was at 42, 43% from 3 this past season at Belmont. And he has deep ties to North Carolina. So I think this one is going to be a tough one for Tennessee to pull. I think Tennessee certainly has a chance to land Cade Tyson, but his dad is a high school coach there in North Carolina. And it seems like a North Carolina Tar Heels battle right now. And North Carolina is desperate for shooting in the portal right now. And with the ties to Carolina for Tyson, I could see the Tar Heels going all in on making sure that they land Cade Tyson. So Tennessee certainly has a chance, but it's going to be a hard one to pull. And if they're able to pull Cade Tyson, then that'd be a terrific duo of shooters if you can also land Dubar, but it would be a very, very impressive recruiting win to beat out the home state Tar Heels there.
Ben, want to get to Tennessee-LSU in baseball. Before that, with our conversation last segment about the transfer portal, to wrap that part of the conversation up in basketball, there's also been Jahmai Mashack speculation, questions about his status. What's the latest you hear or know about Jahmai?
I don't expect Jahmai Mashack to play anywhere other than Tennessee next season. I would be, at this point, very surprised if Jahmai Mashack were to transfer and leave and go play elsewhere. Like you mentioned, there's been a lot of speculation about Jahmai this week. He's kind of been linked to the ongoing situations with Tobey and Jonas, and I do think that Jahmai and Jahmai's mom has made no bones about it on social media that everybody is pulling everybody in a million different directions. So I do think through back channels, Jahmai's been being pulled as well, but I don't expect Jahmai to leave at this point. I think Jahmai will be back next season, and that's obviously a great thing for Tennessee because I think he's capable of more offensively, and he's one of, if not the best perimeter defender in the entire country.
Yes, totally agree with that, with the importance of Jahmai Mashack. So having him back would be very important for Tennessee basketball next season. Important series for Tennessee baseball. Things have gone well in conference play. Not perfectly, but they've gotten out of there at home and on the road last weekend over the last 3 weeks with series wins. Now LSU comes to town. They need a series win badly. What do you expect for Tennessee heading into the weekend, starting with pitching tonight and into the next 3 days?
Yeah, Chris Stamos will get the ball tonight. Tennessee announced that early this morning, mid-morning, I guess, making a change from A.J. Causey, who has struggled the last 2 outings against Georgia and Auburn. I believe it was he allowed 7 earned runs in his first 33 innings this season, and in his last 2 starts, he's allowed 15 runs on 15 hits in about 3 innings of work. So Tony Vitello has not come out and flat out said it, but based off of some of his answers when asked about Causey's struggles, I interpreted it as him not really liking the command or the presence that AJ had on the mound, and that's what this coaching staff, starting with Tony, cares about the most. If you get up there and fail, okay, obviously they don't want to see you fail, but if you're failing with conviction and kind of leaving it all out there, then they can live with the results. And I think Causey is going to be perfectly fine, and Tony has mentioned that as well. But he hasn't of late had the poise and the conviction that he had to start the season when he was pitching very, very well. So I think they're trying to shuffle things up in that regard and try and get him going again and regain that poise. And I think he was also maybe putting too much pressure on himself, Causey, that is. He's from the Huntsville area. He grew up in an Auburn family, grew up an Auburn fan. They were all there in attendance on the Plains last weekend. So maybe trying to do a little too much, maybe a little too amped up last weekend. I expect Causey to be fine, and Tennessee needs him to be fine because he has to be a key piece to this pitching staff if they're going to go out and win a championship, which is what their goal is. But Stamos will get the ball tonight. Chris Stamos, he's been coming out of the bullpen, a lefty, transferred in from Cal. And, again, going back to the Causey thing, like one of the reasons I think Tony is turning the baseball over to Stamos tonight is because of the poise and the conviction and the way he carries himself on the mound. Tony loves that about Stamos, and I think that's why he's getting the ball tonight. You saw Aaron Combs bounce back last weekend as well. If Stamos is just kind of an opener of sorts and only pitches the first inning or two, I would expect to see a heavy dose of Combs as well after he was stretched out last weekend. And then LSU is also shuffling their pitching rotation around. Luke Holman is a guy that transferred from Alabama this past offseason, somebody that Tennessee really, really wanted, and somebody that Tennessee thought it was going to get, but they were deceived by some in Luke Holman's camp. So I think this is going to be a personal one for Tennessee on Saturday, one the Tennessee coaching staff, I think, would really, really like to win. They'll have Drew Beam on the mound, and that'll be a terrific matchup because Luke Holman is one of the best pitchers in the SEC, and Drew Beam is Drew Beam, and kind of setting up a matchup there to – I think LSU is making sure that it can go for the series win there on Saturday if they can pull one out tonight. And the reason Beam is pitched on Saturday in Game 2 all season long is because Tony likes him being in that spot to where he can either win the series or prevent a series loss and carry that momentum going into Sunday. And that'll be arguably the best pitching matchup we've seen in the SEC through a month of conference play.
What's the status of Billy Amick and some of the other players in the lineup from a health standpoint?
Yeah, Tony said on Tuesday following the win over your hometown Alabama A&M Bulldogs, a program that you were just absolutely zero loyalty towards, grew up 2 minutes down the road and showed zero loyalty to them, but that's a separate conversation that I will allow Josh to address. But after that game, Tony Vitello said that Billy Amick, they're hoping that he will be on the active roster this weekend as he comes back from that appendix injury. Not sure when the active roster needs to be turned in prior to a series, but I imagine it's any moment. I got the sense early in the week that Billy was going to play on Friday, which is today. So keep an eye out for that. Don't know that that was written in stone, probably depended on how the week went. But there was some confidence that Billy was going to be available to play on Friday, and that would obviously be a big boost. Not that Tennessee really needed it, because without Billy, they've still been hitting all sorts of home runs and scoring all sorts of runs. Christian Moore and Blake Burke are having phenomenal seasons, and if Charlie Condon didn't exist down in Georgia in Athens, those two guys would probably have a case for National Player of the Year. But obviously, Billy is another professional bat in the lineup, and they'd love to get him back in there.
What is A.J. Russell's status?
They're being very, very cautious with him, and they did avoid, from my understanding, any major injury with him, and it's kind of just dealing with the same thing he dealt with the first time around when he was dealing with the soreness and the tightness. The first time it was in the armpit, and this time around I think it's more just been the arm in general. But they did the MRIs and all that fun stuff, and the tendons and the ligaments, they were all still intact, which is obviously great news to avoid Tommy John or anything serious of that nature. But they are going to be extra cautious with him this time around. It seems like, again, they're dealing with the same thing they dealt with the first time, to where they just need to kind of shut him down for a minute and see if the swelling or whatever it is can calm down and then ease him back into things. So when that happened, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago. At that point, I heard 4 to 6 weeks. So I would look for maybe an early May, middle May return for A.J. Russell. And good thing is that he'll be coming back at some point, it seems like, if everything goes according to plan. But unfortunately, at this point, I don't know that A.J. Russell can come back as a starter. You'll take him in the bullpen because some A.J. Russell is better than no A.J. Russell, but certainly unfortunate news for Tennessee's pitching rotation. I just think by the time he does get back, and then being extra cautious with him, the best he can do is maybe serve in a bullpen role. And hey, maybe he's this year's version of Chase Burns, and we saw how pivotal Chase's role was in the NCAA tournament last year.
You mean the Wake Forest guy? Who's a player to watch this weekend versus LSU for Tennessee?
Well, it's got to be on the mound because we know that Tennessee is going to hit the baseball. LSU has really struggled during conference play. They are 0-4 in conference play this season, have been very, very inconsistent. I talked to your friend Matt Moscona yesterday down there on his radio show, and they're searching for answers. They were asking me about last year's Tennessee team and how they got it turned around, and if that could apply to this year's LSU team. So they have some big names like Tommy White and Luke Holman on the mound, who I discussed. But this is a pitching staff that Tennessee's offense, with or without Billy Amick, should be able to take advantage of. Again, Luke Holman will be very tough on Saturday, so don't freak out if Tennessee's offense can't do anything against Holman. That's probably more Holman than anything. But outside of Holman, they haven't had really anybody perform well on the mound. So the offense is going to hit, is what I'm getting to. So it's going to boil down to who on Tennessee's mound, when Tennessee is pitching, who is able to slow down an LSU offense that has also been inconsistent but has a ton of talent. You have Tommy White in there. Tommy White is still doing Tommy White things at third base, but Hayden Travinsky behind the plate, Jared Jones over at first. Those are some big-time power bats that can wreck a game in a quick second. And their other guys have been inconsistent and struggled throughout conference play, but it's a ton of talent. It's LSU baseball. They're going to have a ton of talent, even if the record doesn't replicate that. And you don't want to be the team where it clicks for LSU. Like Vanderbilt last year was a team where, unfortunately for them, it clicked for Tennessee that weekend. Tennessee doesn't want that to happen to them this weekend, where it clicks for LSU inside of Lindsey Nelson Stadium. And I think the key to avoiding that is either Xander Sechrest or Stamos tonight. Again, I don't know how long Stamos is going to pitch tonight. It may just be an opener situation, but if it's Stamos, if it's Aaron Combs, Xander Sechrest, even Causey getting back going, like those group of guys for Tennessee to take the next step and truly assert itself as a national title contender, those are the guys who I'm watching for each weekend, and the guys that I think Tennessee really needs to step up on a consistent basis.
Ben McKee, GoVols247.com. He has you covered. So you're keeping up with Tennessee baseball against LSU this weekend. It's a big UT weekend overall with transfer targets to follow. And, of course, Tennessee with the spring game this weekend. GoVols247.com has news and updates on all of it. Ben, you're the man. Thanks for giving us so much time here this hour to update us on Tennessee basketball and baseball. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, all right.
Absolutely. And Josh Ward is the man. And for any football coverage, since I know the spring game's tomorrow, Patrick Brown of GoVols247, my coworker, and Ryan Callahan as well have a ton of great football team content and recruiting coverage, because it'll be a big football recruiting weekend as well. And those guys have plenty of coverage up at the site at GoVols247.com. I appreciate y'all.
Do you and Patrick have, like, sad Grizzlies texts at this point in the year? Or are you just on to next year? How does that go?
We are on draft talk right now.
Okay.
We are hyping up the Dalton Connect to Memphis train.
No.
We have not watched the game in several weeks because
Sure.
it is just a very, very sad product. But we are all in on making sure that Dalton Connect can get to Memphis.
Sound like fake fans to me.
Oh, says the guy who grew up a Chicago Bulls fan but won't even recognize them anymore because Michael Jordan doesn't play for them.
Sounds like a Michael Jordan fan to me.
Yeah. Now you're talking, although I'm a Bulls fan, and this last week has been tough, Ben, so I'm thinking about bailing as well. But I'm staying strong right now, as Grizzlies fans find ways to do until next season. Dalton was on our list, our power poll of teams that might not be a bad spot for him. So we'll see what happens. That'll be the next phase to follow beyond the transfer portal, draft opportunities for Dalton. GoVols247.com to see the work from Ben and his colleagues. Ben, thank you again.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.